Immediately from there to a professor position at the University of Rochester. So that was in 1970. And although I was doing a lot of research, and now I'm doing just a little research, but still that's part of my life, I also thought there's another kind of psychology that interests me also. And that is what we call humanistic psychology. It's the sort of thing that's done by Carl Rogers and Erich Fromm and Fritz Perls and so on. And that seemed interesting to me, just for what it was, but also in terms of helping me in terms of becoming a therapist, a psychotherapist. So that seemed like I should spend some time doing that because it interests me. And all the books I write are about interest, basically. So do something that's interesting. So I did. I started reading books of those people. And soon I realized that you can't really understand what humanistic psychology is just by reading books. You have to do it. You have to allow yourself to be within it. So I started looking around for how I could do that, and within humanistic psychology, how it gets done. And the answer simply was, well, you can do workshops. That's the sort of mode for being engaged in it. So I continued looking around and came to find that there was an elderly woman who had been Fritz Perls' teacher, Erich Fromm's teacher, the people whose books I had been reading, and that woman's name was Charlotte Selver. I continued looking, and it said that she gave workshops. I heard that word. She gave workshops all around the North America, because it was Mexico too, and so on, in Europe. And amongst the places that it said that she gave workshops was some little island in the North Atlantic. Oh my God, Monhegan Island? What's that? I was thinking, but okay, if Charlotte Selver is giving workshops on Monhegan Island, I'm going to go there and see what it is. So I did. And Dougie was just telling me how, I don't know if he's here, but he was telling me about my first night here, I think, when he came to tell us that he thought there were too many of what they called breathers. And we should do something about it, but I didn't pay attention to Dougie, and he just went away. So basically, that was it. I came here for 2 weeks and stayed at the Island Inn and did it, not the Island Inn, the Monhegan House, and did a 2-year workshop with Charlotte. And when I left the island at the end of that 2 weeks, I said, okay, this is my kind of place. I know I am coming back to this place. So the next year, I came back to this place. And the year after that, I came back to this place. I started renting cottages here and spending as much time as I could, depending on what else was demanded of me, since I had jobs and things. But it was in 1978 then that I decided, okay, I like this place enough that I'm going to buy a house. So I bought Twin Spruces, and I've lived in Twin Spruces every summer for long summers for however long it is, from 1978 until today. So that's sort of how I got here and the situation. So that's the answer to my first question. The second one, if you've had enough, as I said, I'm going to say it anyway, so it's up to you. And that was about the museum, how I got involved in the museum. Once I had bought a house, I thought to myself, okay, if you're going to be part of a community, you need to take some responsibility for doing what that community needs, whatever it happens to be. And about the time I was thinking that, someone came to me and said, would I be willing to be a trustee for the Monhegan Associates? I said, sure. So I became soon a trustee for the Monhegan Associates, and approximately, I think it was the first trustees meeting that I was at, we were talking about the land holdings of the Monhegan Associates. I think probably everybody here knows about the Monhegan Associates to some extent, but basically their aim is to deal with the wildlands and keep it wild and do it properly and so on and so forth. And though it happened to be the case that the Monhegan Associates at that point actually owned the museum, which at that point I think was either 3 or 4 rooms on the first floor of the keeper's house. That was the museum, and it had some fishing, things about fishing and some things about home life on the island. Okay, so I'm putting that aside for a minute. So at the meeting, we were talking about how much land the associates had, and we realized that there was a huge chunk of land that was basically the whole southern end of the island that starts above Jamie's house and goes all around to Burnt Head and so on. That was still owned by Theodore and Ann Edison. They had already given the associates a lot of land, but still there was this piece, that big piece, that they hadn't. And the Edisons at that point were in their 90s, and the associates didn't have that land, and the only thing that made sense to us was that they give it to us. I mean, they had already given us, they saved this island by buying the whole area between Burnt Head and Whitehead and all of that space under there. So it just seemed sensible that they would do it. Yeah. A wonderful man named Ted Cochran, who is 99 years old now. I mean, a lot of you knew him, but you probably didn't know that. So that's information it's just wonderful. So he was the president of the association, the associates at that time, and the trustees, of which I was one, suggested that he go to New Jersey, which is where the Edisons lived, and talk to Ted and Ann about the land. And so he did, and he spoke to them, and to his surprise, Ted Edison said, you know, we've been thinking a lot about it, and we think that we won't give it to you because we're afraid that if someone gets injured at the museum, they could sue the associates and basically wipe out their entire land holdings. So Ted Cochran came back to Monhegan feeling unhappy, of course, and called a meeting of the trustees and told us what had happened. And he said, I don't know what to do. And I said, well, it seems to me there's a simple answer to what to do. We take the museum and separate it from the associates. And then if somebody gets hurt at the museum, it has nothing to do with the associates, and they don't have to worry about being sued and so on. So the museum has to deal with it, but that's the museum's problem, you know, because we wanted, the primary purpose at that point was to let Ann and Ted Edison know that we could deal with the land in a way that would keep it forever. So everybody else, the other trustees, were, yeah, great idea. So we had a vote and voted that we would do that. And then Ted Cochran turned to me and said, okay, Ed, do it. That means forming a new not-for-profit organization, and then all the trustees and officers and on. So I said, I mean, it was like somebody had grabbed my neck, because, you know, I was a kid and I wasn't up to doing things like that. I just wanted to have fun on Monhegan. But I thought for a few minutes and I finally said, okay, Ted, I'll do it for a year. That was 38 years ago. I actually got elected as the president then, and got unhooked from president today. So that's how I got started. Is there more time?
I think we're good.
Already on.
Yeah. I don't have anything to add to what Ed said, but if anybody else has something they would like to say about Ed or about the museum, the microphone's right here. Come on up. Yeah. If anybody wants to sing a little song.
I have a question for Ed. Ed, could you tell... I press something. Ed, could you tell the story about finding out about the assistant lightkeeper's house from a painting?
Oh.
Love this story.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes.
You're a professor.
The question is just tell a story. So
I'll take it.
When I took over the museum, it had 6 paintings in it. You know, 1 hand worth of fingers plus a finger. That's how many paintings it had.
Wow.
And it had, the rest was history, which is great. I love history. I love the Monhegan history, and was then and continue to be very enthusiastic about doing everything we can with respect to history, of course. But in the 1980s, it began to occur to me that one of the most important parts of the history of Monhegan is the art. And as I said, at that point we had like 6 paintings, or maybe it had gotten up to 7 by then. So I started to encourage people to give paintings to the museum. For instance, like a widow whose husband had been a good painter on Monhegan, wouldn't she like to give one of his paintings to us, and so on. I just use that as an example, but encourage people to be giving us paintings, which we've been doing ever since. And then it got to where we had enough that it began to make sense to think about, well, yeah, but what are we going to do with them? Where are we going to hang them, and so on? And one day I was looking at a painting, a reproduction of a painting, and it happened to have been painted by Edward Hopper. And it was Lighthouse Hill. It was the Monhegan Lights historical light station. And I was, you know, like this, looking at it. And I came to one place in the painting and said, what the hell is that? It was a building that didn't exist. How did it get there? So I went and began trying to find out, and eventually learned that in fact the original painting had a painting in there of what was the assistant lightkeeper's house. In 1858, there was another house built on Monhegan besides the lightkeeper's house, and let's see. They kept it. It stayed there until the 1920s, when they no longer needed an assistant lightkeeper. So the government, in its great wisdom, yeah, knocked the damn thing down. Get rid of it. We don't need it. But that was what I had been seeing in that Hopper painting. And I looked some more to just find out, and we found papers about it and the sizes of it and everything in the Coast Guard, you know, files in Boston somewhere. And sure enough, that's what it was. And I thought, of course, we just rebuild that building so that it maintains the total historic nature of the whole light station. And so that was it. I started talking to people about it, and Jackie, and of course, was very excited about the possibility, and many others. So that was it. We started. John Kordak was working with me very much in terms of laying out how we should do it exactly, because we wanted it the exact same dimensions. And there were pieces of the foundation under it, so we wanted it to sit on exactly the same place that it had sat. And basically the only real difference between this and the one that was there 100 and some years ago was that there was a second floor on the other one, because, you know, the keepers, the assistant keeper's family had bedrooms up there. We didn't need bedrooms. We needed space for wonderful galleries. And that's what we did, is made it in that way. So the inside is what you see now all the time when you go there. So that's how
That's how that happened.
Yeah.
You've been telling us about what happened up until now.
Yes.
Maybe you could just give us some thoughts on what you think is going to happen in the future.
My thoughts of what's going to happen in the future is, number one, Jen Pai is going to go on being a fabulous director. And the other thing that's going to happen, is that Adam Blumenthal is going to become the president. He is the president, actually, as of now, as of earlier today, and move the museum forward. I mean, he's the president, so... Well, we'll see. Maybe Lynn can give you the guidance you need, so you'll figure out ways of raising money and doing other things that presidents do. And of course, there are many other people who are working with us constantly. Jen spoke about them in the meeting that we had earlier today. But anyway, that's it. With wonderful people and a setting like we've got, you know, it's got an incredible future.
Yes.